Kael'Veth stood at the observation window of the Valori command vessel and watched the human ship approach. It was ugly, where Valori ships curved like blades, designed to inspire fear and respect. The human carrier looked like a block of metal covered in weapons. No beauty, no elegance, just purpose. He did not want to be here. 3 weeks ago, the High Council had made a decision that shamed every warrior in the Dominion. They had asked the humans for help. The Valori, who had conquered 100 worlds, who had never bent their knee to any species, had admitted they could not win this war alone. The Kreth Collective was destroying them, wave after wave of insectoid warriors, endless and hungry, had pushed through Valori space like fire through dry grass. 3 major fleets had been lost. 12 colony worlds had fallen silent. The Valori were running out of ships, running out of soldiers, running out of time. And so they had turned to the humans. Kael'Veth's father had served 40 years in the fleet. His grandfather had died fighting the Silurian Empire. His family name was carved into the Hall of Heroes on the homeworld. And now his commanders had assigned him to babysit primitives. The door behind him opened, and High Marshal Soranthan entered. The old warrior's scales had faded to pale gray with age, but his eyes remained sharp. "You are sulking," Soranthan said. "I am reflecting, High Marshal," he replied. "You are sulking like a child denied a sweet. I can tell the difference." The old warrior moved to stand beside him at the window. "I know you believe this assignment is a punishment. It is not. It is a test." "A test of what?" "Of whether you can set aside your pride long enough to learn." Soranthan turned to face him. The humans defeated the Kreth at Nexus Prime. Outnumbered 8-1, they held the line for 19 days. Do you know how many Valori fleets have held against such odds? Kael'Veth said nothing. "None," Soranthan said. "Not one. The humans did something we could not. I want to know what." An hour later, Kael'Veth's shuttle docked with the human carrier. The ship was called the Relentless, a name he found appropriately brutal. A human officer met him at the airlock, a tall female with short dark hair and a face that looked like it had never smiled. "Commander Zara Holt," she said, "you must be our Valori liaison." Officer Kael'Veth of the 3rd Fleet. He performed the traditional greeting bow. She did not return it. "Follow me. I will take you to your quarters, and then to Sergeant Ortiz. You will be attached to his squad for ground operations." Kael'Veth had to hurry to keep up, which he suspected was intentional. The interior of the human ship was even uglier than the exterior. Bare metal walls, harsh lighting, no art, no decoration, nothing to lift the spirit. The Valori believed that warriors fought better when surrounded by beauty. The humans apparently disagreed. They passed groups of human soldiers in the corridors. Kael'Veth studied them with growing confusion. Some were laughing. Some were complaining loudly about the food. One was sleeping in a corner, using his helmet as a pillow. They did not look like warriors preparing for battle. They looked like workers, waiting for their shift to end. "Your soldiers seem relaxed," Kael'Veth said carefully. Commander Holt glanced at him. "We ship out in 6 hours. They are resting while they can. Among my people, warriors spend the hours before battle in meditation and prayer. They sharpen their blades and recite the names of their ancestors. Do they sleep? Sleep is for afterward. A true warrior does not require rest before facing death." Commander Holt stopped walking. She turned to look at him, and Kael'Veth saw something in her eyes that he did not understand. It was not anger. It was something older and heavier. "Officer Kael'Veth," she said quietly, "when we reach Helix 4, we will be fighting for approximately 3 weeks. Continuous combat. No rotations, no relief, no safe zones. My soldiers will sleep whenever they can, because they know that exhaustion kills as surely as enemy fire. Your rituals are very pretty. My soldiers are very practical." She started walking again. "Sergeant Danny Ortiz, was not what Kael'theth expected. The man was not tall. He was not physically impressive. He sat in the squad room cleaning a weapon, and he barely looked up when Kael'theth entered. "You are the alien." It was not a question. "I am Officer Kael'theth of—" "I know who you are. Sit down." The squad room held 8 humans, each doing something different. A female with medical symbols on her armor was reading a book. A young male was writing on a piece of paper. Another was exercising in the corner. None of them paid any attention to Kael'theth. "This is your squad?" Kael'theth asked. "What is left of it?" Ortiz finished with his weapon and finally looked up. His eyes were like Commander Holt's, heavy, tired, old in a way that had nothing to do with years. "We started the war with 20. Combat, disease, and bad luck cut us down. These 8 are what survived. I am sorry for your losses." "Do not be sorry. Be useful." Ortiz stood. "When we hit dirt, you stay behind me. You do what I say, when I say it. You do not engage in single combat. You do not offer challenges. You do not accept surrenders without my permission." Clear? Those restrictions violate the basic codes of honorable warfare. Good thing we are not fighting an honorable war. Kael'theth felt his scales flush with anger. The codes exist for a reason. They separate warriors from murderers. Ortiz walked toward him, stopping close enough that Kael'theth could smell the cleaning oil on his hands. When he spoke, his voice was soft. 2 years ago, the Kreth hit a human colony called New Eden. 40,000 civilians, families, children. The Kreth do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They do not follow codes. They ate those people alive and used their bones to mark territory. He paused. So we learned to be something else. Something that could fight them and win. You can call it murder if you want. I call it survival. He walked away, returning to his seat. That night, Kael'theth could not sleep. He kept thinking about Ortiz's words, about the weight in his eyes, about the soldiers who laughed and complained like the war was just a job. He walked through the ship and found an observation deck. Through the window he could see Helix 4, a green and blue world that had once been a Valori colony. Now it was a battlefield. He found the young soldier there, the one who had been writing earlier. The human was staring at the planet with a strange expression. "It is beautiful," Kael'theth said. The human nodded. "My sister lived there. Before. I am sorry." The human turned to look at him. His name tag read Nunez. He was young, perhaps the youngest in the squad, and his face still held some softness. "The sergeant told me about your warrior codes," Nunez said, "about honor and single combat and all that." "Yes. It sounds nice." Nunez looked back at the planet. "We used to believe in things like that too. Before we learned what the universe actually is." The dropship hit the ground hard, and Kael'theth's teeth slammed together. Around him the human soldiers were already moving, unbuckling harnesses and checking weapons with practiced speed. No one spoke. No one needed to. Sergeant Ortiz slapped the door release, and gray light flooded the cabin. Outside, the ruins of a Valori city stretched in all directions. Buildings that had once touched the sky now lay in pieces. Streets that had held thousands of his people were empty and dead. "Move," Ortiz said, and they moved. Kael'theth had trained for combat his entire life. He had studied tactics, mastered weapons, learned the ancient forms of blade and honor. None of it had prepared him for this. The humans did not march. They flowed. They used every piece of cover, every shadow, every broken wall. They communicated with hand signals and quiet clicks, never speaking louder than a whisper. They moved like water finding cracks in stone. Corporal Megan Price fell in beside him. She was the medic, a small female with tired eyes and gentle hands that Kael'theth had seen reassemble a weapon in under 10 seconds. "Stay low," she said. "Stay quiet. Stay alive." I know how to fight. Not like this. She pulled him down behind a collapsed wall as a Kreth patrol passed 2 streets away. Your people fight in formations. Clean lines, clear targets. The Kreth do not care about formations. Neither do we. The patrol passed, and the squad moved again. They reached their objective an hour later, a communications tower that the Kreth had captured and turned into a command post. Kael'veth expected Ortiz to call for a direct assault. The Valori way would be to announce their presence, challenge the enemy commander, and engage with honor. Instead, Ortiz spent 20 minutes studying the building through a scope. 4 guards on the ground level, 2 more on the roof, command staff inside, maybe 6 or 7. He lowered the scope. Nunez, Price, take the roof. Quiet. Give me a click when it is done. And then we announce ourselves? Kael'veth asked. Ortiz looked at him like he had grown a second head. Then we go in through the windows and kill everyone inside. Without warning, without offering them a chance to surrender? The Kreth do not surrender. They pretend to surrender, and then they release biological weapons, or call for reinforcements, or eat your face. We tried accepting surrenders early in the war. It cost us 3,000 soldiers. Ortiz turned back to watch the building. So no. No warnings, no chances. We go in fast, we kill everything, and we complete the mission. Kael'veth felt sick. This was not warfare. This was slaughter. 2 quiet clicks came through the radio. The roof guards were dead. Ortiz moved, and the squad followed. They crossed the open ground in seconds, pressed against the building's wall, and then went through the windows in a coordinated burst of glass and violence. Kael'veth had never seen anything like it. The humans cleared the building in under 3 minutes. They moved through rooms like ghosts, shooting anything that moved, checking corners and shadows with mechanical precision. No mercy, no hesitation, no waste. One Kreth warrior, larger than the others, stepped into Ortiz's path and raised its claws in the traditional challenge posture. Among Kael'veth's people, this would require a response. Honor against honor. Ortiz shot it in the head without breaking stride. That was a challenge, Kael'veth said afterward, when the building was secure and the squad was catching their breath. Yes, Ortiz said. You are supposed to accept. Fight blade to blade. Prove your worth. My worth is getting my people home alive. Ortiz reloaded his weapon. A challenge is just an enemy standing still long enough to get shot. That night they made camp in a basement, while rain poured outside. The squad took turns on watch, while the others slept. Kael'veth could not rest. His mind kept replaying the assault, the efficiency of it, the terrible speed. He found Megan Price sitting alone, cleaning blood from her medical kit. Not human blood. She had performed emergency surgery on a wounded squad member during the assault, keeping him alive long enough to reach extraction. Now she worked in silence, her hands steady despite everything. How do you do it? Kael'veth asked. Do what? Fight like this, kill without hesitation, and then, he gestured at her medical kit, save lives with those same hands. Price stopped cleaning. She looked at her hands for a long moment. My mother was a doctor, she said. She taught me that healing and hurting are not opposites. They are tools. You use whichever one the situation requires. She returned to cleaning. I hurt the enemy so my people do not die. I heal my people so they can keep fighting. It is not complicated. It seems complicated to me. That is because you are still thinking about honor. She met his eyes. Honor is a luxury. It is something you can afford when your survival is not at stake. When the Kreth came for us, we could not afford it anymore. We became what we needed to become. And what is that? Effective. The next day brought worse. They found survivors in a collapsed shelter. Valori civilians, 15 of them, trapped for days without food or water. The squad immediately began rescue operations. Humans and Valori working together to shift rubble and create escape routes. Kael'veth watched Nunez carry a Valori child on his back through a narrow tunnel, singing softly to keep her calm. The same soldier who had killed 3 Kreth that morning without blinking. The same soldier who had joked about enemy body counts over breakfast. "I do not understand you," Kael'veth said to him later. Nunez shrugged. "What is to understand? We kill the enemy. We protect civilians. We go home if we can. That is the job. You killed enemies this morning like it was nothing. Now you carry children and sing songs. So? How do you switch between them so easily?" Nunez stopped walking. His young face went serious for the first time since Kael'veth had met him. "Who said it was easy?" He looked away. "I cry sometimes, at night, when no one can see. I think about the things I have done and the things I have seen, and I cry like a baby. Then I wake up and do it again, because the alternative is letting the Kreth win." He started walking again. "The sergeant says we are broken people doing necessary things. I think he is right." That night, Kael'veth dreamed of his homeworld, of clean streets and beautiful architecture, and warriors who fought with honor and codes. He woke up in a basement surrounded by humans who had thrown away everything he valued. And he began to wonder if maybe they had been right to do so. On the 3rd day, a Kreth ambush caught them in the open. Energy fire came from 3 directions at once. There was no cover, no time to think, no chance to form a proper defense. Ortiz threw himself on top of a wounded soldier and took 2 hits meant for her. His armor held, barely. Nunez dragged them both behind a fallen wall, while Price provided covering fire with a weapon in each hand. They should have died. By any reasonable calculation, they should have been overwhelmed and killed. But the humans did not fight reasonably. They fought dirty. They threw grenades into hiding spots. They collapsed a building on top of an enemy position. They used the bodies of fallen Kreth as shields. When it was over, the squad had taken 3 wounded. The Kreth had taken 47 dead. Ortiz sat against a wall, breathing hard. His armor was cracked and smoking. He looked at Kael'veth and almost smiled. "Still think we should have accepted their challenge? At the chaos and destruction and complete lack of honor. I am beginning to understand," he said slowly, "why you win." The forward operating base was built from salvaged materials and desperate hope. Human and Valori soldiers worked side by side, constructing walls and setting up defenses. 2 weeks into the campaign, the alliance had become something real. Kael'veth barely recognized himself anymore. He ate human food without complaint. He slept in short bursts like they did, always ready to fight. He had stopped thinking about honor codes and started thinking about survival. The transformation frightened him, but he could not deny its effectiveness. "You are becoming one of us," Nunez said one evening, watching Kael'veth clean his weapon with human techniques. "I am adapting." "Same thing," Nunez grinned. "The sergeant says you might actually be useful soon." High praise. A commotion at the base entrance drew their attention. Human scouts were returning, their faces pale and sick. One of them was vomiting behind a supply crate. Another sat on the ground and stared at nothing. Commander Holt emerged from the command tent and spoke quietly with the lead scout. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture went rigid. "All squad leaders to command," she announced. "Now." Kael'veth followed Ortiz into the tent. The air inside felt heavy with something terrible. "Intelligence has located a Kreth research facility 12 kilometers north," Holt said. "Our scouts found it 2 hours ago." She paused. "They also found prisoners, Valori prisoners." A murmur ran through the assembled soldiers. Kael'veth felt hope rise in his chest. "We will mount a rescue operation," he began. "Let me finish." Holt's voice was sharp. "The Kreth have been using the prisoners for biological experiments. They are infecting them with parasitic organisms. transforming them into weapons. She looked directly at Kael'theth. I have informed Valori High Command. They have refused to authorize a rescue. They consider the prisoners contaminated beyond saving. The hope in Kael'theth's chest died. They are abandoning their own people? They are making a tactical decision. Holt's tone made clear what she thought of that decision. The official position is that the prisoners are already dead. No resources are to be spent on recovery. Ortiz spoke quietly. And what is our position, Commander? Holt looked at him for a long moment. Something passed between them, some understanding that Kael'theth could not read. Our position, she said finally, is that we do not leave people behind. Briefing in 1 hour. Dismissed. The assault team assembled as night fell. 20 human soldiers and Kael'theth, moving through darkness toward a facility that should not exist. No Valori backup, no official authorization. Just humans, doing what humans did. The facility was built into a hillside, half buried and heavily guarded. The team split into groups and approached from multiple directions. Kael'theth stayed with Ortiz's squad, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else. Purpose. These humans were risking everything to save his people, and his own commanders had refused to help. They breached the outer defenses in silence. The humans had become shadows, ghosts that killed without sound or warning. Kael'theth moved with them, no longer shocked by their methods. He had learned. The interior of the facility was worse than anything he had imagined. Laboratories lined the corridors, filled with equipment that Kael'theth did not recognize. Through observation windows, he saw things that broke something inside him. Valori bodies twisted into impossible shapes. Limbs replaced with biological weapons. Eyes that had been kind once, now empty and wrong. And the sounds. He would never forget the sounds. Keep moving, Ortiz said, his voice flat and hard. We find the ones we can save, and we get them out. They found the holding cells on the lowest level. Rows of cages containing Valori prisoners in various stages of transformation. Some were still themselves, crying and begging for help. Others had gone too far, their bodies no longer their own. Megan Price moved through the cells, making rapid assessments. This one can be saved. This one too. This one. She stopped. Her face went pale. This one needs mercy. Do it, Ortiz said. Kael'theth watched as Nunez approached a Valori whose body had been twisted beyond recognition. The prisoner looked at him with eyes that still held awareness, still held pain. It tried to speak, but only wet sounds came out. Nunez knelt beside the cage. I am sorry, he said softly. I am so sorry. The shot was quick and clean. In another cage they found children, Valori young, taken from colonies and brought here for experiments. Some were still untouched, huddled together in terror. Others were not. Price lifted a dying child from the floor. The little one had been opened up and put back together wrong. There was no saving her. Everyone knew it. Price began to sing, a human song, soft and gentle, the kind of song mothers sing to children. She held the child close and sang while Nunez prepared his weapon. Do not look, Ortiz told Kael'theth. You do not need to see this. They are my people, which is why you do not need to see this. Kael'theth looked anyway. He owed them that much. They rescued 11 prisoners that night, 11 out of nearly 200. The others were beyond help. The Kreth researchers tried to flee. Commander Holt's orders regarding them were simple and absolute. Ortiz executed 13 of them personally. No trials, no questions. Just quick, efficient death, delivered without anger or satisfaction. It was not punishment, it was prevention. Dead researchers could not hurt anyone else. On the way out, Kael'theth found himself walking beside Holt. The commander's face was blank, but her hands were shaking slightly. "You violated orders to come here," he said. "Yes. You will face consequences." "Probably." She kept walking. "There are things worth facing consequences for." "The Kreth researchers, you killed them all." "Yes. My people would have tried them, given them a chance to explain themselves. Justice has procedures." Holt stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes were fire and ice combined. "Those things cut children open to see what was inside. They made mothers watch their babies transform into monsters. They kept records of screaming." Her voice remained perfectly level. "I am not interested in justice. Justice is for situations where both sides are people. Those things stopped being people when they started their experiments. I am interested in making absolutely certain they can never do this again." She walked away. Back at base, the rescued prisoners were loaded onto medical transports. Human doctors worked alongside Vylori healers, doing what they could. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Kael'Veth found Ortiz, sitting alone behind the supply depot. The sergeant was staring at his hands. He did not look up when Kael'Veth approached. "How do you endure this?" Kael'Veth asked. "We do not endure it." Ortiz's voice was hollow. "It breaks us. Every single time, it breaks us." He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "We just choose to be broken in a direction that still lets us protect people. That is all we have. The choice of how to break." Kael'Veth sat down beside him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "My people abandoned their own," Kael'Veth said finally. "You risked everything to save them. That is the difference between us." Ortiz wiped his eyes roughly. "Your people have honor. We have stubbornness. When someone tells us that good people are beyond saving, we do not accept it. We go anyway, we try anyway, even when it costs us everything." "Why?" Ortiz was quiet for a moment. "Because someone has to," he said, "and we would rather it be us than no one at all." 1 month had passed since the research facility. 1 month of constant fighting, constant death, constant horror. The combined human and Vylori forces had pushed the Kreth back to their primary hive world. Victory was close enough to taste. Kael'Veth stood in the briefing room of the Vylori command vessel, surrounded by officers he had known his entire life. They looked at him with something between respect and unease. "Your reports have been valuable," High Marshal Sorenthan said carefully. "Your insights into human tactics have helped us coordinate effectively." "Thank you, High Marshal." "However," Sorenthan paused, "there have been concerns. Your behavior has changed. Your language, your methods." The old warrior's eyes were searching. "Some officers believe you have become too close to the humans, that you have lost sight of what it means to be Vylori." A younger officer spoke up. He refused to accept a formal challenge last week. A Kreth commander offered single combat, and Kael'Veth simply shot him from distance. "The commander was stalling for reinforcements," Kael'Veth said flatly. "I recognize the pattern from human intelligence reports. Accepting the challenge would have cost us 30 soldiers. That is not the point. The codes exist for reasons beyond tactics. The codes exist because our ancestors fought wars where survival was not at stake." Kael'Veth heard the steel in his own voice and did not soften it. "This war is different. The Kreth do not follow codes. They do not offer true challenges. They do not respect surrender. Fighting them with honor is not noble. It is suicide." Silence filled the room. Sorenthan studied him for a long moment. "You sound like a human." "Perhaps. Or perhaps I sound like someone who has learned what war actually costs." Kael'Veth met the old warrior's eyes. "The humans did not make me this way. The war did. The humans simply taught me how to survive it." The briefing ended without resolution. Kael'Veth returned to the human section of the ship, where Ortiz's squad was preparing for the final assault. They had been given 2 days of rest, but none of them seemed to know what to do with it. Nunez was writing letters again. He had a stack of them now, addressed to families of fallen squad members. He wrote one after every mission, recording what had happened and how their loved ones had died. "Why do you do that?" Kaleveth asked. "Because someone should remember." Nunez sealed another envelope. "Because these people mattered, and their families deserve to know they mattered until the end." "It must be painful, writing the same kind of letter over and over." "It is." Nunez smiled sadly. "But pain is part of remembering. If it did not hurt, we might forget. And they deserve better than to be forgotten." The final assault began at dawn. Dropships fell toward the Kreth hive world like metal rain. Human and Valori soldiers descended together, united by a shared enemy and a shared purpose. Whatever differences remained between them no longer mattered. Victory mattered. Ending this war mattered. Kaleveth fought alongside Ortiz's squad through tunnels that twisted like living things. The Kreth hive was not just a structure, it was a creature, grown rather than built, and it fought back with everything it had. They lost soldiers in the first hour. A cave-in took 2 humans. A Kreth ambush killed a Valori lieutenant that Kaleveth had known since childhood. There was no time to mourn. There was only forward. In the deeper tunnels, they encountered resistance unlike anything before. Elite Kreth warriors, bred specifically for combat, defended their queen with mindless ferocity. The fighting became close and desperate. Kaleveth found himself back to back with Ortiz, firing into waves of enemies that seemed endless. Nunez went down. A Kreth blade caught him across the chest, punching through his armor. He fell hard and did not move. Megan Price was at his side in seconds, applying pressure and shouting for cover. "He is alive," she reported, her hands red with his blood. "Barely. I can stabilize him, but we need extraction." "We are too deep," Ortiz said. "Extraction cannot reach us here." "Then I will carry him." A Valori soldier Kaleveth did not know stepped forward. "I will take him to the surface." "That is suicide. The tunnels are full of enemies." The Valori soldier shrugged. "The human saved 3 of my squad yesterday. He sang to a dying child so she would not be afraid. I owe him this." He lifted Nunez carefully and began the long climb to the surface. Kaleveth never learned if they made it. There was no time to wonder. The mission continued. They found the queen's chamber at the heart of the hive. She was enormous, a mountain of flesh and chitin surrounded by her personal guard. When the assault team broke through the final defenses, she raised her head and spoke in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "You have fought well, warm bloods. I offer terms." Commander Holt stepped forward. "We are listening. Spare my brood. Allow us to withdraw from all conquered worlds. We will return to the darkness between stars and trouble you no more." The queen's multifaceted eyes gleamed. "In exchange, this war ends. No more death, no more suffering. Peace." It was a reasonable offer. Objectively, strategically, it made sense. Millions of lives would be saved. The Valori could rebuild. The humans could go home. Holt was silent for a long moment. "No," she said. The queen's body language shifted to confusion. "You reject peace? Your soldiers are dying. Your resources are exhausted. Victory will cost you dearly." "Yes." Holt raised her weapon. "But your survival will cost our children more." "Explain." "You will withdraw. You will rebuild. And in 50 years, or 100, or 1,000, you will return. Some other species will learn what we learned. Some other civilization will burn while you feed." Holt's voice was ice. "I will not pass this burden to children not yet born. The cost of permanent victory is here and now. We will pay it." The queen made a sound that might have been laughter. "You would sacrifice your own people for strangers who do not yet exist?" "Yes. That is madness." "No." Holt fired. "That is humanity. The battle for the Queen's chamber was brutal and short. The elite guards fought to the last, but they were fighting soldiers who had already decided to pay any price. There was no desperation in the human assault, only cold determination. They had counted the cost and accepted it. When the Queen fell, the hive began to die. Kael'veth stood in the ruins of the chamber, covered in blood that was not his own. His armor was cracked. His body ached with 100 small wounds. Around him, human and Valoroi soldiers sat or stood or lay where they had fallen. Ortiz approached slowly. He looked as tired as Kael'veth felt. "It is over," Ortiz said. "Yes. How do you feel?" Kael'veth considered the question. He thought about who he had been 1 month ago, the proud officer who believed in codes and honor, the warrior who thought war was a test of virtue. That person was dead. "I do not know how to feel," he admitted. "I do not know who I am anymore." Ortiz nodded slowly. "That is normal. War takes who we were and burns it away. What is left is who we choose to become." He put a hand on Kael'veth's shoulder. "You fought well. You protected people. That means something." "I killed without mercy. I ignored every code I was raised to follow." "Yes," Ortiz squeezed his shoulder. "And because you did, people who would have died are still alive. That is the trade we make, our souls for their survival." He let go and stepped back. "Welcome to humanity." Around them the hive continued to collapse. Soldiers began moving toward the exits, carrying their wounded and their dead. The war was ending. Something else was beginning. Kael'veth followed Ortiz toward the light. 1 year had passed since the war ended. Kael'veth stood at the window of his quarters on the Valori homeworld and watched ships move through the sky. Trade vessels mostly, carrying goods between worlds that were rebuilding. The scars of war remained visible everywhere, but life was returning, slowly, painfully, but returning. He had been given medals, promotions, a hero's welcome that made him want to scream. The politicians and generals spoke of glory and honor, using words that felt hollow and false. They had not been there. They had not seen what victory actually looked like. His communication device chimed, a message from Megan Price. She had left the military 6 months ago. The endless parade of wounded soldiers and shattered bodies had finally broken something in her. Now she worked in a refugee medical center on one of the colony worlds, treating civilians who had survived the Kreth occupation. She wrote to Kael'veth every week, short messages about small victories. A child who had learned to walk again. A family reunited after 3 years apart. The quiet work of healing. Today's message was simple. "Nunez is doing well. He sends his regards. We miss you." Nunez had survived. The Valori soldier who had carried him to the surface had managed the impossible, fighting through a tunnel full of enemies with a wounded human on his back. Both of them had made it to extraction. Both of them had lived. Nunez had lost both legs below the knee. It did not slow him down. He taught combat medicine at a military training center now, insisting that new soldiers learn to save lives as well as take them. He had told Kael'veth that the teaching helped, that passing on what he knew made the things he had done feel purposeful. Kael'veth was not sure anything could make his experiences feel purposeful, but he was glad Nunez had found peace. His assistant entered with a message. "Sir, you have been summoned to address the War Academy. The graduation ceremony requires a speaker." Kael'veth almost laughed. The War Academy wanted him to tell young warriors about glory and honor and the noble traditions of combat. They wanted stories of heroism that would inspire the next generation. He thought about refusing. He thought about all the comfortable lies he could tell instead of the truth. He thought about the young faces that would look up at him, expecting validation of everything they believed. "Tell them I accept," he said. The War Academy auditorium was filled with young Valori in their ceremonial best. They sat in perfect rows, scales gleaming, eyes bright with anticipation. Behind them, officers and dignitaries waited to hear inspiring words about warrior tradition. Kael'veth walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. It was full of proper phrases and noble sentiments. It was complete garbage. He set it aside. "You expect me to tell you about honor," he began, "about the glory of combat and the sacred codes that separate warriors from murderers. That is what speakers at these ceremonies usually say." The audience shifted, suddenly uncertain. "I am not going to tell you those things. Instead, I am going to tell you the truth about war, and about the humans who taught me to survive it." He told them about Sergeant Danny Ortiz, who killed without hesitation and cried alone at night. About Megan Price, who held dying children and sang them to sleep. About Leo Nunez, who joked about death and wrote letters to families so they would know their loved ones had mattered. He told them about the research facility, about the sounds he could never forget, about the mercy they had been forced to give, because some wounds were beyond healing. He told them about Commander Zara Holt, who had defied orders to save people her own government had abandoned, about the choice she had made to end the Kreth permanently, whatever the cost. "The humans are not better warriors than us," Kael'veth said. "They are not braver or stronger or more skilled. What makes them terrifying is that they understand something we have refused to accept." He paused. The auditorium was completely silent. War is not a test of honor. War is suffering, industrialized. It doesn't care about codes or traditions or noble intentions. It takes everything you have and demands more. The humans do not glory in it. They hate it. They hate every moment of it, every death, every impossible choice. And that hatred makes them willing to do whatever is necessary to end it. He looked at the young faces before him. "I watched humans risk their lives for Valori strangers. I watched them carry wounded soldiers who were not their own. I watched them sing to dying children and write letters to grieving families and mourn enemies they had killed." His voice softened. "They did not fight because they enjoyed it. They fought because someone had to. They carry scars you cannot see, wounds that will never heal. And they would do it all again, because that is what protecting people actually costs." The silence continued for a long moment after he finished. Then slowly, someone began to clap. Others followed. Not the enthusiastic applause he had heard at previous ceremonies, but something quieter and more thoughtful. He did not know if he had changed anything. Probably not. Young warriors would still dream of glory, and the truth would still be waiting to break them. But at least he had told it. 1 week later, Kael'veth traveled to Earth. The humans had built a memorial for their fallen soldiers, a wall of names stretching for kilometers, each one representing someone who had not come home. Kael'veth walked along it slowly, reading names he did not recognize, trying to comprehend the scale of sacrifice. He found Ortiz near the end, standing alone before a section of the wall. "You came," Ortiz said without turning around. "You invited me. I did not think you would actually come." Kael'veth stood beside him and looked at the names. There were so many. Row after row of people who had given everything so that others could live. "How do you bear it?" Kael'veth asked. "Coming here, seeing all of this." "I do not bear it." Ortiz's voice was quiet. "I just keep showing up. I owe them that much." He finally turned to look at Kael'veth. "How are you?" "I am not who I was. None of us are." Ortiz turned back to the wall. "The person I was before the war dies somewhere in those tunnels. What is left is someone else. Someone shaped by choices I can never take back." "Do you regret them? The choices?" Ortiz was silent for a long time. "Sometimes, late at night, when the dreams come, I wonder if there was another way, if I could have been better, kinder, more human." He shook his head slowly. But then I think about the people who lived because of what we did, the colonies that were rebuilt, the children who grew up safe, and I decide that the person I became was worth the cost. They stood together in silence. Around them, other visitors moved through the memorial, humans and aliens alike paying respects to the fallen. The war had touched everyone. Nunez asked about you, Ortiz said eventually. He wants you to visit his training center. Show the new soldiers what a proper ally looks like. I would like that. Good. Ortiz almost smiled. He also wants to teach you a human card game. He says you owe him money from a bet you apparently made. I remember no such bet. That is what makes Nunez dangerous. He remembers everything. Ortiz's expression softened. Thank you for coming. It means something, having someone here who understands. Thank you for teaching me. Calveth looked at the wall of names again, for showing me what it truly means to protect something, that it costs more than glory, that it costs everything. Ortiz nodded slowly. Welcome to the species, he said. We are glad to have you. They stood together until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the memorial. Two soldiers from different worlds, bound by experiences that no one else could fully understand. They had been broken by war, transformed by it, shaped into something that had not existed before. But they had survived, and they had saved others, and in the end, perhaps that was enough. The shadows grew longer. The names on the wall seemed to glow in the fading light. Calveth thought about the young warriors he had spoken to at the academy, about the horrors that awaited them if another war came, about the choices they would have to make. He hoped they never had to learn what he had learned. He hoped they never had to become what he had become. But if they did, he knew the humans would be there to show them the way. That was what humanity did. They stood beside you in the darkness. They carried you when you fell. They taught you how to break in a direction that still let you protect people. And then they stood with you at memorials, helping you carry the weight of what you had done. It was not honor. It was something better. It was brotherhood.